I am so thrilled on this episode of Your Brand Amplified to have Brenden Kumasari. I said that wrong. Sorry, Brenden. After I practiced it, I knew I was going to get it wrong. But you know what? That's what happens. And I'm going to keep it in the episode because we all have problems sometimes communicating. But that's why you're here today, is because you help people hone in on their communication skills. So, Brenden, please introduce yourself to our audience.
Absolutely, Annika. Thanks so much for having me. So, yeah, my name is Brenden Kumarasamy. I'm the founder of Master Talk. Master Talk is a YouTube channel I started to help the world master the art of communication and public speaking. But how I got started is probably more interesting, which when I was in business school, I went to college for business, Annika, and I did these things called case competitions.
Mm.
Think of it like professional sports, but for nerds. So while other guys my age are playing baseball or rugby or some other sport, you probably wouldn't see me play if you looked at me for a few seconds here. I don't really have the physique for those things. I did presentations competitively. But
Mm.
then what happened is as I got older, I started coaching a lot of the students on how to speak, mostly for free back then. And that's what gave me the idea for the YouTube channel.
And I think that is brilliant. I am a former theater nerd, debater, all of those things. I love public speaking. My daughter is in her first year of high school and she is taking introduction to MUN, which is Model United Nations. And
Yep,
so
of
she's
course.
having to learn those skills, how to write briefs, how to present, how to show up as the country that she's representing on whatever issue that is. So I'm really excited for her to go on this journey of understanding how to speak in front of audiences, because these are skills you need for everything. And it's one of the biggest factors when I'm working with a client who isn't comfortable speaking. How do I get them to break out of that discomfort and that imposter syndrome that they're feeling, feel more comfortable speaking, understand their talking points, understand how to get rid of those filler words, the so, like all of those things that we all fall prey to sometimes. Well, I'm sure you don't. Because you've honed your skills so much. So the YouTube channel, when did this start? And it's called Master Talk, correct?
You got it, Annika. And amazing, by the way, that your daughter started so early in mine. You said first year of high school. Wow, that's really
Just
impressive.
intro. So she gets to participate in
Still,
a few different conferences, and then hopefully she'll make the team next year.
still very, very impressive. I love that. Yeah, I started Mass Talk probably in January 2019. So it's been three years, 9 months, and I've been coaching since I was 19. So this is my seventh year now.
Mm, fantastic. And what has Master Talk done for your profile, and how does it help you gain clients and actually make a living off of the business and the art of teaching people how to communicate properly, Brenden?
Absolutely, Annika. Happy to go into those details. So let's start from the very beginning, which is
Yeah.
I never thought Mass Talk was ever going to be anything. I
Wow.
was just making videos for fun. And the reason is because I had a very good corporate job out of college. That's why I did these case competitions, because all the big companies use that as a recruitment tool to pick out the best students and give them
Interesting.
jobs.
Okay.
Right. So I worked as a technology consultant at IBM. Most of my friends work at Goldman Sachs. They work at investment banks on Wall Street. Like that was the goal, right? That's the
The
game that was going to
dream.
get right to get my parents out of poverty and to be successful. I was the first person in my lineage of families to graduate from uni. So
Mm.
there was a lot of pressure on me to succeed. So I wasn't looking to be an entrepreneur. Master Talk was just for fun. But 9 months into Master Talk, I met my business partner in the middle of nowhere in Columbus, Ohio, at an event called Summit of Greatness, which is hosted by Lewis Howes, who's the host of the School of Greatness podcast. And he's the one who looked at my expertise on YouTube and he said, you could charge clients thousands of dollars for coaching, right? And I said, what? And that's how I built the business.
That is fantastic. And you also still work with youth, helping them understand how to communicate? Or I guess they also have your YouTube channel to go to.
You got it. So I probably spend around 3 to 5% of my time now coaching kids, and
Mhm.
it's mostly my clients as kids because it's easy for me to
Mm,
manage. Most of my business is usually CEOs and executives at this
yeah.
point, so I have more mind space to just create more free content for the world. But yeah, the way that I monetized was very counterintuitive. I never thought it would monetize. I was just trying to create the best content in the world on the subject, and then as I started making more money at IBM, I would invest a percentage of that money into video production communication.
Hmm.
And that's how I professionalized the channel. And then even today, my YouTube channel makes very little money. We're talking 100, $200 a month, and which is way less than what I spend a month on production. It's really the coaching clients that I got from the YouTube channel that allowed me to exit corporate.
What is one of your clients' biggest aha moments? And you don't have to, you can share or not share as many details about the client as you want, but I think it's important for people to understand why it is important to hire somebody who can help you become an expert at speaking, particularly if it's something you're not comfortable doing.
100%. And by the way, I'm the most easygoing person you'll ever meet. You can ask me anything about the business. I'm happy to share numbers, whatever adds value. So here's what I'll say, right? The biggest challenge I had with my business was making a clear distinction between who is the person who's going to watch my content and who's going to give me money. And
Mhm.
that's a very different type of person,
Yes.
right? Because the person who's going to watch my videos, which is my mission in the world, is I think the next Elon Musk is a 7-year-old girl who can never afford me, right?
Mhm.
They're in Cambodia, they're in South Africa, they're in India, and at the rates that I charge now, it's virtually impossible for them to afford me. So for me, the ethos of my life is how do I democratize communication in a way that Dale Carnegie couldn't in
Mhm.
the era he was born in? Because podcasting didn't exist back then. You don't even know what his voice sounds like, right? Whereas me, I have a very unique opportunity to do that. So now the next piece is okay, if I want to do that full time, how do I make money? Right. And Kevin Kelly, I'm sure you've talked about him a bunch of times on this podcast. He has a great article called 1,000 True Fans, which essentially is if you have 1,000 people who love you so much that they're willing to give you some amount of money, you can
Mhm.
make a full-time living doing what you love. The example he gave was with musicians, $100 a year, 1,000 people give you $100, you make 100 grand a year.
Yeah.
For me, the model's a bit different, which is 100 true fans, because my packages are in the thousands of dollars, as I'm sure most coaches are. So I only need 100 people. And generally, those people make more money from the service than what they're actually putting into the service. Example,
Mhm.
6-figure coach making 100 grand already, but sucks at messaging. And
Mhm.
on prospecting calls, they're nervous. They're not able to lead with confidence to improve their conversion rate. And by the way, if I'm rambling, just jump in at any point. CEO of a company who wants to grow to 7 or 8 figures and is already have a somewhat successful business, that person's usually really bad at communication, doesn't really know how to convey a message to a larger group of people as they scale and they start getting more speaking opportunities. And the third one is the executive. That's usually most of my clients because they
Mhm.
don't pay for it. Their company does. They're a
Mhm.
manager. They want to be a vice president. They hire me to tune them up.
Wow, very interesting. Yeah, and for me, I also think about this almost as media training in some ways, because often when I'm working with clients, if they don't have a lot of experience speaking, then I'll put them on some small podcasts just to get them excited and to start thinking about their message. We'll create talking points, right? And then we will also have them do some interviews that are maybe written so that maybe they're not comfortable talking to a journalist yet or being on the radio or being on broadcast media, but getting them comfortable sharing their story, talking about why they're the best at what they do or whatever their mission and brand ethos is, right? I think is so important. And so you take it a step even further of how do you not just do that, but how do you become the best speaker at what you're doing and level up, whether it's going from $100,000 in business to 200, 500,000, 7 figures, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, or moving up from that manager or director to the VP level or whatever that is.
Absolutely. But the advice for people listening to this is I didn't know any of this when I started. A lot of people say you got to niche down, you got to find. And I completely disagree with that advice. And the reason is because you don't know what your niche is.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it's all about splatting a bunch of things on a wall, trying a bunch of different customers at different prices, and then figuring out through that action who's actually gravitating towards you and who do you actually like working with.
Yeah.
And that's when you start to understand. So, for example, a lot of people who hired me just ended up being brown technology professionals who work at Microsoft or IBM, want to become a VP. They trust me because I'm in the same community as them.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to be a tech guy. So that's my
Yeah.
niche. So a lot of those people end up saying, okay, yeah, I'll hire you over any other coach. But you don't really know that ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
I think the key is more like you just got to put yourself out there. You have to have that clear vision, like I do for that 7-year-old girl who can't afford me. And then through that action, it leads to information that you didn't have prior to the action taking.
Mm-hmm. And Brenden, you also mentioned that you are the first person in your family to go to uni. So large part of your initial motivation to get a really high paying job after you graduated was to help your family. and you weren't thinking about being an entrepreneur. And I think that's how a lot of us start, is we have some other motivation and we find our way to entrepreneurship because we realize that our skill set and our passion lie somewhere else other than what our corporate day job might be. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about that, and how have you gotten your family involved in the business now, or what does that look like?
Absolutely, I'm happy to talk about that. So to your point, and I hope my story, because I feel a lot of us aren't honest enough about this,
Yeah.
is it's okay to try and save yourself first before you try and save the world. I had very little interest in saving the world when I was younger. It was really about getting out of poverty. Like, how do I retire my mom? How do I put myself in a situation that even if I'm miserable, at least I'll have money? That was literally my thought process from 12 to 22, which is kind of a weird thought process for a guy who's 12 to have. But that was my focus. So I worked really hard. I got to business school. I had my oversized suit on because I couldn't afford anything better.
Mhm.
And then I was 19 when I was an accounting major, which is what I graduated in. Funny enough, right? Communication expert, has a bachelor's degree in accounting. I wanted to work at one of the big four accounting firms. I saw that as my ticket out. KPMG, PricewaterhouseCoopers. And I was super lost because I thought PwC was a water bottling company. That's how lost I was.
Mm.
And I realized that the way you get a job at these companies is by doing case competitions. And I was like, huh, what's a case competition? And then they explained it to me. And that led to me getting the job, but it accidentally made me the youngest communication coach on earth at that point, anyways, at the executive level. So I think I guess I won't say I guess one of the, but I think the key is that we need to prioritize making decisions,
Mhm.
because a lot of the times our passion, Annika, won't be obvious to us at the beginning. Like,
Mhm.
if you had told me at 19 that not only was I going to get my dream job, but then I was going to quit my dream job that I had gotten, cut my salary by 70% and be a YouTuber and coach, I would have thought you had a mental illness. So there you go.
Now, one of the questions that you're always happy to answer is daily exercises that can help people become better communicators. What are some of those recommendations that you have?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to talk about that. So let's start with the context first, which is communication is like juggling 18 balls at the same time. Storytelling, body language, smiling, right? You're doing smiling really well, right? Facial expressions, pacing, vocal tone variety. There's
Mhm.
so many different things. So instead, the better way to simplify this is, what are the three easiest balls that we could juggle
Ooh.
in the air? So it's easy for us. Like, branding's a great example. Sure, we could talk about ethos, who the ICP is, the ideal, or we could just start posting and then go to step two, right? So it's the same thing with this. So what does that look like in communication? What that looks like is, number one, and I'll pause at each one so I don't monologue for too long here, is the first one is the random word exercise, Annika. So pick a random word like a master, like trophy case, like computer, and create random presentations out of thin air on the spot. And the reason this is such an effective exercise is, if you can make sense out of nonsense, you can make sense out of anything. So that's what I recommend people do a few times a day.
I love that.
Which
That
brings
is,
me, go
it's
ahead.
almost like a Toastmasters exercise in some ways. Though I don't know if everybody who's listening, they're probably too young. I know Toastmasters is still around, but I don't think of it as a young person's purview necessarily.
Right. So Toastmasters is great. I would say their version of this is called table topics, where you get asked a random question, you
Mhm.
have to answer it. I would say the only nuance between both of these exercises is the random word exercise is much easier and there's a lot less thought involved.
Mm.
So it's a lot faster to drill
Mhm.
versus the question, the table topics format. It's a bit more stressful and you have to constantly come up with new questions. So it
Mm.
delays the practice. Whereas me, it's like drill,
Yeah.
just drill this a lot. So that would be the nuance.
Okay. And then what is another exercise that you recommend?
Absolutely. So number two, Annika, is the question drill. We get asked questions all the time in our life, on a
Mhm.
podcast, on a sales call, at school, at work. We're bombarded all the time with questions. But most of us are reactive to those questions. We're
Mhm.
not proactive to them. Example, when I started guesting on shows probably a few years ago when I didn't really know what I was doing, I remember somebody asked me the funniest question. He said, "Where does the fear of communication come from?" And I looked at the guy and I said, LA, London. I wasn't really sure. So I was kind of lost. So I didn't want to make that mistake again. So every day for 5 minutes, just 5 minutes. I would ask and write down one question that I thought the world would ask me about my expertise. And I did that every single day for 5 minutes. But if you do that for a year, Annika, with only 5 minutes of prep, you'll have answered 365 questions about your expertise. And that exercise alone will make you bulletproof.
Amazing. What else? Come on, pile it on.
So,
These are great tips.
for sure. So number 3 is so simple, nobody does it, Annika, which is make a list of the 10 people that you love the most, the 10 people who really support your project, your brand, what you're trying to achieve in the world, and ask yourself a simple question. When was the last time we sent these people, not a 20-minute, not a 20-hour, but a 20-second video message to just say, hey, I really appreciate having you in my life, Annika. Thanks so much for being there. I love your energy, your charisma. We don't do that enough.
Yeah.
That is what makes the difference. And it's also how I make most of my money, funny enough, since you asked me about business. Most of my money doesn't come from podcasts. 50% of it comes from word of mouth. Why? This is literally what I do. Make a list of all my current clients. Make a list of all my past clients. I wait for the birthday or their holiday, and I open my phone and I go, what's up? Happy birthday. Hope you're having a beautiful day. And I'm the only one in their network who's sending them a video message, not a pitch, not a sales offer for an upsell. And you know what happens 10% of the time, Annika? They always go, oh, Brenden, you're so thoughtful as always. You know, this is VP. I forgot to introduce you to. You guys should have lunch. Have lunch with the guy. Done. $5,000 in a day. Right. And that's really the key. But more so than that, do this with your grandmother. Do this with your mother. Do this with the people in your life, and it'll really make their day.
Yeah. Showing that gratitude and appreciation for others that have supported our journeys. And it puts a lot of good energy out into the world too. And obviously you've seen that when you do that with clients or potential clients, it also has the benefit of keeping you top of mind and bringing in business.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what would you say is the biggest challenge for people when they're thinking about speaking? And public speaking obviously has a broad range. So that could be speaking to somebody who on a sales call, trying to close their business. It could be speaking in front of thousands of people or hundreds of people, making a presentation at work. Runs the gamut.
Absolutely, Annika. And feel free to correct me if I'm wrong on this. But since your show's more about brand, I would say what's the biggest challenge for people who are trying to build a brand, right? A personal brand, communication. They're really trying to post videos. I would say the biggest mistake is they don't think about their brand in decades, but rather days. So whenever they're thinking about their vision, they go like, what's hot? TikTok is hot. It's blazing. You know, LinkedIn organic is super hot right now. So they just post a ton and then they just give up. So there's no consistency versus going in 10 years from now. What do you want your personal brand to look like? What impact do you want that brand to have? What does that look like? So I started Master when I was 22, right? But when I started it, which was like 4 years ago, I asked myself, who is Brenden going to be at 32? What brand will he have? What ideas will he share? What clients will he have? And when you come from that perspective, it changes the way that you make decisions. Example, if I didn't think that far out, I would have said something like, yeah, let me just post on Instagram every day or something. But when I thought about a decade, I would say, you know what? Instagram organic might die in 4 years. You know what? LinkedIn is not a great way to compound the resources over time. And I realized really quickly with that thought process that there's really only a handful of mediums that compound over time, like over 5-10 years. YouTube is one of them. A lot of people got famous off of YouTube and they built very successful platforms. It just takes a long time. The second one was having a dedicated podcast like the one we're on right now, having a blog or writing a book. Those are like the main four, but mostly the last three that I talked about. So out of those three, I just looked at them and I said, well, podcast's hard to compete against because a lot of people have audio and a lot of people can create an audio. Blogging is something I don't want to do. And YouTube is the winner. I knew I could win on YouTube because I'm the youngest guy in the industry. So if I just keep posting once a week for 10 years, I'll win.
Very true. Very true. And given me some very good reminders that I need to do more video content myself. So what else? Do you consider yourself an introvert or an extrovert by nature?
I'm definitely an extrovert. I just went to like 3 dance parties this week, so I'm pretty extrovert.
Yeah. Good for you. So how do you communicate differently, or how do you teach communication differently to an introvert versus an extrovert?
Great question, Annika. So there's a couple of points there. So there's one which is the practical, and then there's one around the emotion as a coach. Let's talk about the practical stuff first. So for introverts, what I always like to say is the biggest problem is they don't know how good they are. I know it's very simple,
Yeah.
but that's really the key. So let me just explain that for the introverts who are listening to this. Introverts are really good at three things that extroverts like me spend years trying to figure out. Number one, pausing. Introverts are exceptional at pausing. And the reason is because they don't talk that much. So it's easy for them to pause. So if they're in a presentation, they'll pause to reemphasize points of their message. That's one. Two, listening. Once again, I talk a lot. I'm a yapper. That's why I'm a great guest. But when you're an introvert, it makes you an exceptional listener because you speak less on average. So you're able to quickly tailor the messaging of what you want to have your audience take home a lot faster than me. Another piece that's important is around pausing. Extroverts like me suck at pausing, Annika. It takes a lot of practice that's intentional
Yes.
because whenever I'm at a bar or an event and there's a pause, I immediately want to fill it up. Tell me, what's your favorite color, right? I always want to
Mhm.
fill up the space, which brings me to number three. And this is the most surprising. Introverts are a lot more accessible as communicators than extroverts are. Example,
Hmm.
Gary Vaynerchuk, our good friend Gary V, right? Massive, massive social media influencer. I'm a big fan of his work, obviously. He's a great guy, but you either like him or you don't.
Mhm.
There's no in between with this guy.
That's
You either
right.
say, I love Gary, or you go, I would never talk to this person ever. Nobody says that about Brene Brown, though, Annika.
Right.
Nobody goes, hey, I hate this Brene Brown. If you say that, the FBI is going to come to your house and arrest you. So, yeah, that's what I would say. Triple down on your strengths.
Mhm. Those are really good points. And it's funny because I do know some introverts who are really good at talking to people, and people are surprised when they find out they're introverts. And I think it's because they use those skills that you just talked about. And it's not that they're trying to, they just do it. Whereas I'm an extrovert as well, but I've been public speaking for a long time. I love doing it. Throw me in front of an audience of thousands and tell me 5 minutes before what I'm supposed to talk about, and I'll do it. And I've had to learn how to insert these pauses and these other things. I think also probably the practice of debate and theater and other things that I did helped me understand how to communicate with audiences better as well. But if you're not going to do those things, then you need to look at what skills can you develop and how can you be better at those. And because that really engages your audience, whether they're a customer, a client, somebody who's going to promote you and whatever job you have, whatever that audience is.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you.
Mm. So what continues to inspire and motivate you?
Beautiful question. This is a good segue into what the vision is. So I'm happy to
Ooh,
tell you.
yes.
Sure. So I was watching a TikTok the other day, and it's a bit of a long story, so hold with me for a second
Yeah.
here.
Bring that.
Watching a TikTok, and the TikTok's about Taylor Swift. So it's 2014, and she wins an award called Woman of the Year by Billboard, the music company. And she stands up on that stage, she looks at the audience, and she says the following: Your future Woman of the Year is 11 years old right now. She's sitting in a choir, she's learning how to sing, and she has big dreams to become a singer one day. And we need to take care of her, we as a society.
Beautiful.
And then she walks off stage. And then the TikTok flips like 5 or 6 years later. And Billie Eilish becomes the youngest inductee in Billboard's history to win Woman of the Year, like 17. She's barely a woman, right? And she gets up on the stage with her big baggy jacket, her big baggy glasses. She looks at the stage and goes, Yo, what's up, guys? I don't know how I won this, but like super grateful. And she just keeps rambling. And then the last 30 seconds of what she says completely changes my life. She's rambling, she's rambling, she's rambling. She looks at the stage and she goes, I was watching Taylor Swift's thing in 2014 and I was 11 years old and I was in choir and I was learning how to sing and all of you took care of me. So thank you, Billboard. And she walks off the stage. And the reason that shook me to my core and it gives me goosebumps every time I say that story, Annika, is because I thought about the next Elon Musk. Because when Elon was 13 years old, nobody gave a shit about that guy. He was a kid in South Africa, was getting abused by his dad, was in a terrible dysfunctional family, and the only thing he had was Isaac Asimov's science fiction novels and books. That's all he had. Nobody sat him down and said, hey, you're going to be a superstar someday. You're going to create rockets and shoot them into outer space. You're going to have all these cars. So you should probably learn communication. Nobody did that for him. He still succeeded, but he would have had an easier time with communication.
Yeah.
What about the next Elon? Because the next Elon, we don't know who that person is either. It's
Right.
probably a 13-year-old girl in Cambodia.
Mm-hmm.
And what are we doing for her? And I realized I was the only person who had that thought. So I did something about it. So the mission is to be the best communication coach that ever lived, not to be the best, but to have the title of being the best so I can democratize the knowledge for everybody.
Yeah. I love your use of the word democratization. And it's really about creating an equitable playing field. Most of my clients that I work with are nonprofits or social justice pioneers or have some social good component to their business. They're trying to help change the world. And so that's something that your message is just resonating with me so much, because I kind of found the same thing. I didn't know that I was someday going to have a PR and marketing company, or that this is what I was going to do for the rest of my life. I had other things I wanted to do, right? And then, but this is what I was good at, and this is what I was able to help people in. And then that word of mouth, like with you, and the way I portrayed myself, it kind of showed me, oh, this is my niche, and these are my people, and these are my clients, and this is what feels good to me. And you're doing the same thing. It's like you have these clients that you're helping, but more so, you're helping anybody who has access to the technology of YouTube understand how to be a better communicator. And that person is probably going to send you a letter when they become the youngest person to speak and win some competition or whatever it is. And they'll say, I listened to your videos, I watched your videos, and I learned how to communicate effectively through them. It's really inspiring, Brenden.
Absolutely. Thanks, Anik. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So what do you see as your next phase? You have Master Talk, you have your clients. Are you writing a book? Are you doing those other things that we talked about being the things that are easiest to propel your business forward, as the listeners in our audience are doing?
Absolutely, Annika. Whenever I get this question, I always start with gratitude. I never thought I would be where I am today. It's crazy. I still pinch myself sometimes. A 26-year-old kid who has all these CEO clients, all these executives. And even if I'm just getting started, it's crazy that I have to worry about money and all these things anymore. So I'm super grateful about that. I would say for me now, the next stage of Master Talk is scale. How do I now scale up all the resources I'm starting to get after 7 years of kind of grinding this out as a coach and as a social media content creator? And now how do I use those tools and really explode this brand? And that's really the focus for the next 5 years. So last year I quit my corporate job and I said, look, I'm making enough money from this thing to go at it full time, and it's been working ever since. So let's see what happens. In terms of the book, I'll probably wait a few more years until I feel I'm ready for it.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. But I love that you didn't say, oh, I haven't thought about writing a book. You're like, yeah, I'm going to write a book, but it's a little bit further down my path. What else are you planning to do? Is there anything else that we should keep in mind or be watching for?
I would say that the YouTube is probably going to be most of my focus because that's where I feel out of all of the ways of distributing content, that's the one that's the most efficient, just based on everyone who's creating content in the world. But beyond that, it's really going to be about just scaling up the coaching business, scaling up the socials, and then getting on bigger and bigger podcasting shows and keep leveling up the message.
Wonderful. So what is the easiest way for people to find you? Obviously, we know YouTube, but then if they want to connect with you, your website, follow you on other social media platforms to just learn more of your tips and tricks and learn more about you.
Absolutely, Annika. Really appreciated this conversation. Thanks for holding the space so well. Really appreciate it. Of course.
My pleasure.
Of course. So 2 ways to keep in touch. The first one, like you said, so well, the YouTube channel, just type Master Talk. The second one is I do a free workshop on communication over Zoom every 2 weeks. And this workshop is not recorded, it is live. So I'll be on the call. I coach people on the call. So if you want to attend that, all you have to do is register on our website, rockstarcommunicator.com.
Fantastic. What a great value. And I will have all of these resources in our show notes for everybody to view, click through, link to, etc. Now, I always like to ask people, do you have a favorite quote or mantra that you live by?
Absolutely. And it's one that was funny. I was in my basement one day and I noticed it rhymed, so I stuck with it. And the quote is, be insane or be the same. If you want to be like everyone else, that's totally fine. But if you made it to the end of this interview, you're probably somebody who wants to make an impact in the world. You're probably somebody who's really dedicated to your growth. So the only advice that matters is the following. Don't you find it insane that I started a YouTube channel, not on pranks, not on music videos, But on public speaking and executive communication, my mother's basement, then I went on to coach those CEOs. Yet I'm too scared to drive a car. I'm in the 0.1% of top listeners on Spotify for Justin Bieber. I can karaoke in 8 different languages. And I go partying with my family at least every quarter. How does any of this make any sense at all, Annika? And that, my friend, is the point. When every decision in your life makes sense to the only person that it should, which is you, you're probably making the right decisions. So be insane or be the same would be my closing thought.
I have no other questions. I have nothing else to add. Mic drop right there. Brenden, this has been a really delightful conversation. And I am so excited for our listeners to hear all of the great advice that you have for how to become more effective communicators, whatever that means and whatever that audience is. So unless you have any last things to say, I'll give you once, twice, 3 times. All right. Then audience, thank you for coming back for another week of Your Brand Amplified. I will have everything in the show notes, and I will be back again next week with another amazing guest.